The U.S. court order to the FBI, DEA, and other federal agencies in the U.S. to release unredacted copies of Tinubu's files actually came as a huge surprise. This is because many didn't know that the case was still ongoing after these agencies released redacted copies of the files a few months ago. But now, the man behind the Freedom of Information request, David Hundeyin, has now revealed what actually happened. How he appealed the case. Of course, he was financing the entire court litigation with his personal money. Aaron Greenspan being the front because he's a US citizen. David Hundeyin revealed this in an X-Space he hosted. We will hear that in a moment. He said the emergence of Donald Trump as the US president changed everything. Before Trump, the judge handling the case was delaying it, sort of at the level of what's obtainable in Nigerian courts. Also, when this case is reported by Nigerian news media, they never give David Hundeyin credit. Maybe it's out of spite or just their modus operandi. This young man, did he really do this? Did he really discover Tinubu's criminal past? Is he really the one behind the Freedom of Information request? Is he just trying to take credit because the whole thing is kind of shrouded in secrecy? You know, many issues. Anyway, kudos to David Hundeyin for his patriotism. Let's hear him.
First of all, let me just clarify something. There's this narrative going around that all these files are going to be released on the 2nd of May. That's not true. What is happening on the 2nd of May is that the agencies in question are required to file something called a joint status report, latest by the 2nd of May. Now, what that joint status report contains is a schedule for the release of these documents. In other words, a timetable for when they are going to release the documents. So the last time this happened, when the redacted documents were released in 2023, the joint status report, which came in, I think it was September 10, 2023, stated that from the end of October is when these documents will start being produced. And the first batch of documents, redacted documents, was produced on October 31. And it was produced for the next 5 months, so from October to February 2024. So it's going to be something similar this time around. So the deadline for filing that joint status report is May 2. So in that joint status report is when you're then going to see the deadline that the FBI and the DEA, the timetables that the FBI and the DEA will propose for releasing these unredacted documents, right? And I also need to clarify, because I've been following the conversation online with a fair bit of amusement, because I realized that a lot of people have no idea what's even going on. They really, really don't understand what's going on. So let me try and break it down as quickly and as gently as possible. So long story short is that in 2020, this started in 2022 after I wrote the story, which I'm sure we're all aware of, and I produced a documentary which is available on the Jumbotron, as you can see. So Aaron Greenspan, who I've been working with on this case, he reached out to me because he runs a website called plainsight.org, which is a website that is focused around legal disclosures, FYAs, and open sourcing of American legal records, federal and state records. So he reached out to me because the plainsight.org page for Bola Tinubu had been receiving a huge spike in traffic since I published that story. And he realized that this was the source of the traffic and this is what was going on. He read my story and he understood. So then he reached out to me and we started the collaboration back in 2020. So the first step of that collaboration was something called an FYA request. So I'm sure I don't need to explain what an FYA request is because we also have FYA in Nigeria. So I'll just skip that. So the first step was presenting an FYA request toward the end of 2022. This FYA request was denied. So we sent FYI requests to 6 government institutions. So the FBI, the DEA, the IRS, the CIA, the State Department, and the US Attorney's Office, which is under the Justice Department. The rationale for doing that was that in a federal investigation, the Tinubu investigation was a US federal investigation. So in a typical federal investigation, especially one involving drugs, there's usually cross-agency collaboration. So it's usually not just one agency. So if it's drugs, and then it's across state lines, so the FBI will definitely be involved. The DEA, which obviously is the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA will definitely be involved. The IRS probably will be involved because it involves money laundering, and the CIA potentially could be involved because the person at the center of this thing is now like a person of geopolitical significance, which means that he has value or potentially being used as an intelligence asset, which is why we FY CIA. And then the State Department for the same reason as CIA. And then the U.S. Attorney's Office, because they would obviously hold some records on any federal investigation. So we sent in the FYA toward the end of 2022. Those 6 FYAs, they were all denied. So the next step when your FYA is denied is that you appeal. We submitted the appeal in 2023. The appeals were also denied. So then we took it to court. This was, I think, in March 2023 where we first went to court. So a lot of things happened. First of all, normally when you go to court in an FYA process, normally you have to hire a lawyer, like a litigation lawyer, which is very expensive in the US. Fortunately, Aaron specializes in FYA litigation, even though he's not a lawyer. But I would quite confidently say that he knows FYA litigation better than most FYA lawyers because this is all he does. That's the organization he runs. That's what it's about. So Aaron agreed to work on this thing pro bono on the condition that all the filing costs and associated costs of filing this case, that I would bear those costs because I'm the one who wanted this thing. I'm the one pushing it, right? So that was basically the arrangement. So from day one, I've been funding this case. The filing costs, so $80 here, $400 there. I've been the one paying it from day one when we started in 2023. So we started that process March 2023. And then in September 2023, as I mentioned earlier, was when we then got the joint status report saying that they're going to start releasing documents from October 2023. And then those documents came out and they were all redacted. So basically, even though you can still tell that this document clearly is inferring that this person was involved in heroin trafficking, this person's name and all mention of this person is intentionally removed from the. So that's what it means to redact a document. You cover over or remove certain information that you want to remain secret. So all reference to him, to his family name, his wife, all those things, kids, all those things were taken out of these FBI files. So those were the files that were released between 2023 and 2024. Those were the redacted files already. So we then appealed, which I think is what a lot of people don't know. A lot of people think that's where the matter ended. Okay, the files were redacted and that was the end of that, which is why after Trump became president, a lot of people were then asking me, oh, are you going to apply for those files again? They didn't understand that the process never ended because we had been in court since 2024, since 2023 actually, when the redacted files started coming out. We went back and we appealed. So we applied for something called a summary judgment. Summary judgment basically means that the judge delivers a ruling, a final ruling. So there's no need for any unnecessary litigation. So we don't waste our time going back and forth, exchanging stupid arguments that don't make sense. Because the US government lawyer, a guy called Jared Littman, I mean, this is someone that if I see him in real life, you should better avoid him because, I owe him, let me just leave it at that. So let me not say something I'll regret on the recorded space. But there is no type of stupid, fatuous, incredibly dumb argument this guy did not make in court. Like, it was just incredible. This guy made an argument. If you read through the case files on plainside.org, you'll see where he said it. This guy argued that the fact that the IRS had already done like their own indictment, there was already like a 41-page IRS affidavit, which was in the public domain, didn't mean that the IRS had officially acknowledged the existence of this case. That the 41-page legal affidavit is not proof that this case exists. So in other words, the global response, which is we can neither confirm nor deny, should be. This was this guy's argument. So anyway, so to avoid going back and forth on this kind of thing indefinitely, Aaron recommended that we apply for a summary judgment. So we applied for a summary judgment last year. That was 2024. And the judge took her very sweet time. And I'm going to explain why in a second, which will be the answer to the second question, which is that can they appeal this judgment? So the judge took a very, very sweet time and basically wasted all of 2024. I think this judgment could have been delivered a year ago, but she took her very sweet time and allowed us waste our time, our energy, and our money pushing this thing, quietly as I was doing. And then there was a change in government in the US. Trump came into power, and one of the first things Trump did was that every US attorney, that's a lawyer working for the US federal government in the Justice Department, every US attorney appointed by Barack Obama, he basically purged all of them, right? And one of them was our guy, Jared Littman, who had been fighting us, right? So I don't know whether he actually still works at the Justice Department or not. All I know is that we stopped saying his name. So there's every chance that he got caught up in that purge. This was actually reported in the newspaper. You can Google it. Trump actually said that every US attorney that was appointed during the Obama era, that they're going after them. They also went after US federal judges that were appointed during the Obama era. And our judge, Beryl Howell, was one of them. So it's very interesting that this woman who had been allowing us waste our time had been giving some very suspect preliminary rulings. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by very suspect. In 2023, when we first filed this FYA case, one of this woman's preliminary rulings was that Bola Tinubu's lawyer should be allowed to intervene in the case. Bear in mind, this is a case between us and the US government. It's Aaron Greenspan versus the 6 agencies, right? That's what it says on the document. There was nobody else officially involved in the case. I mean, obviously, except me, even though my name didn't appear on the documents, but you know my level of involvement there. However, because, a Nigerian news platform whose name I'm not going to mention, but I know what mentioned, now went and did this thing that a lot of Nigerian journalists love to do, where someone else has done some work, you find out somehow, and then you go and piggyback on that person's work, and you try and basically gain some cheap glory for yourself, and that's what this platform did. This lawsuit, I had kept it very quiet. Nobody knew. Literally, the person I was sleeping with did not know. I was keeping this thing very quiet, and then this Nigerian platform, whose name again I shall not mention, the editor went and checked PESA. PESA is the US federal legal database, and saw that there was an existing lawsuit mentioning Tinubu, and then just went and reported it. Didn't bother finding out background information. So one day I just woke up, I opened Twitter, and I saw my case all over the timeline. What's happening? How did this happen? Anyway, long story short, that was how Tinubu became aware that this case existed. So then he sent his lawyers. If you recall, this was around the time when those same lawyers were involved in defending him against the Chicago State University trash fire, right? That same lawyer, Carmichael, he sent him to come and intervene in the case. And we obviously told the judge that we oppose intervention in the case. This is an FOIA case. It's a matter of public interest. Why should a public official be allowed to intervene in a case to try and oppose the release of records that are of public interest? It's a public official. You won't believe that this woman gave a preliminary judgment that Tinubu's lawyer should be allowed to intervene in the case because, and I quote, his privacy concerns are not adequately protected by the complainants in the suit. In other words, that because any potential privacy concerns that Tinubu might have are not being addressed by the people who are currently involved in this suit, so his lawyer should be allowed to intervene so that his lawyer can protect him. And I thought that was an incredible judgment to give. This is an FOIA lawsuit. And just for extra context, this is a woman who, she herself, if you read her history, she was very, very instrumental in the expansion of the US FOIA Act. In fact, she was so instrumental that she has received a journalism award for her work in expanding the FOIA Act. So for this woman of all people to go and deliver a judgment saying that the president, as in the whole president of 200 million people, should be allowed to, his privacy concerns should be allowed to supersede the rights of the Nigerian public to know this thing. That's the kind of judge we've been dealing with, right? And then Trump comes in and starts his usual, he starts going after everybody that's an Obama era holdover. Next thing you know, this this judgment comes out, which is like a complete 180 from the kind of direction that this judge has been going in. It was very clear to me as a last year that this judge is either she just wants to keep this thing going indefinitely, she doesn't want to deliver a judgment, or she's going to deliver a judgment in favor of these agencies that don't want to release these things. But Trump comes in and all of a sudden everything just changes. And this happens. So that's the situation that we're in. So in answer to the second question, which is that is it possible for them to appeal? Are they going to appeal? Technically, on paper, there is a possibility of what's the term for it? I forget the exact legal term. But technically, there's a possibility of appeal. But between you and I, that's not going to happen. But let's just say that the political circumstances surrounding this ruling make it almost impossible for an appeal to take place. Because long story short is that this decision wasn't made because, David and Greenspan had such a fantastic case that they put together and they were so brilliant in their country. That's not the real reason. The real reason is that politically, the situation has changed in the US. The US federal government no longer sees any value in protecting, you and I know who. The situation has shifted. And they have made what amounts to a geopolitical decision. So, I'm sure I don't need to spell it out. So,